Hey guys, today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. A successful tech executive, a brilliant woman with her whole life ahead of her. She called 911 twice, begging for help as her husband's fists rained down on her. The police came, they arrested him, they let him go. And 2 months later, Caitlyn Tracy's body was found at the bottom of a high-rise stairwell, so brutalized that her foot had been severed from the 24-story fall. Her husband, a powerful attorney, told police he hadn't seen her in weeks, but security cameras told a different story. Text messages told a different story. The truth told a different story. This is the case of a woman who did everything right, who called for help, who fought to escape, but the system failed her at every turn. And when she finally tried to leave for good, her husband made sure she would never walk out that door alive. This is the murder of Caitlyn Tracy. Caitlyn Tracy was 36 years old and living proof that hard work and intelligence could take you anywhere you wanted to go. She had climbed her way to the top of the tech industry, landing a position as Chief People Officer at Newset, an artificial intelligence consultancy firm based in Chicago. It was the kind of role that demanded brilliance, leadership, and the ability to navigate complex corporate landscapes with grace and confidence. Caitlyn had all of those qualities and more. She came from a loving family in New Buffalo, Michigan. Her parents, particularly her mother, Dr. Monica Tracy, a professor at Wayne State University, had raised her to be strong, independent, and compassionate. They were close, the kind of family that stayed connected despite busy schedules and competing demands. Caitlyn made time for dinners with her parents, for phone calls that stretched late into the evening, for moments of connection that reminded her where she came from and who she was at her core. But somewhere along the way, Caitlyn met someone who would change everything. His name was Adam Beckerink, and on the surface, he seemed like exactly the kind of man a successful woman like Caitlyn might fall for. He was 47 years old, a tax attorney working as a partner at Duane Morris, one of the most prestigious law firms in Chicago. He was educated, articulate, and knew how to present himself as sophisticated and stable. But beneath that polished exterior lurked something dark, something violent, something that would ultimately destroy Caitlyn's life. They dated for 2 years before getting married. From the very beginning, Caitlyn's family saw red flags that she either couldn't see or chose to ignore. They disliked Adam immediately, sensing something off about him, something dangerous hiding behind his charming smile and professional credentials. They tried to convince her to leave him, to walk away before things got worse. But Caitlyn, like so many victims of domestic violence, believed she could make it work. She believed love could conquer the darkness. She believed he would change. The relationship was toxic from the start. They engaged in an on-again, off-again pattern that anyone who understands abusive relationships would recognize immediately. The cycle of violence, remorse, reconciliation, and escalation played out over and over. Caitlyn's family witnessed the constant fear in their daughter, the way she seemed to shrink when Adam was around, the way her confidence and brightness dimmed under the weight of his control. On April 8, 2024, Caitlyn and Adam got married. It was a quick ceremony, conspicuously absent of Caitlyn's family. The fact that she excluded her own parents from her wedding should have been a warning sign visible from space. But abusers are expert manipulators. They isolate their victims from support systems, from the people who love them and might intervene. Adam had successfully cut Caitlyn off from the family who could have saved her. The marriage lasted 6 months. 6 months of hell that Caitlyn tried desperately to escape. After the wedding, she relocated to a home near her parents in New Buffalo, Michigan, sometimes even living with them. She was trying to create distance, trying to find safety, trying to reclaim some control over her life. But Adam wouldn't let go. He followed her, he tracked her. He showed up uninvited and unwanted, exerting the control he believed he was entitled to. In October or November of 2023, before they were even married, Caitlyn took a brave step. She filed for an order of protection against Adam, citing for incidents of alleged physical and verbal abuse. The petition detailed horrors that no person should ever endure: strangling, suffocating, having her head slammed against a cabinet, being put in a headlock, being physically prevented from leaving through a door. These weren't arguments that got out of hand. These were acts of violence meant to intimidate, control, and terrorize. Caitlyn told her mother about the abuse in heartbreaking detail. A neighbor would later confide to media that Adam enjoyed strangling Caitlyn, that he took pleasure in cutting off her air supply and watching her struggle. Think about that for a moment. This wasn't a man who lost his temper and regretted his actions. This was someone who derived satisfaction from causing pain and fear. But Caitlyn never got that protective order. She withdrew the petition, and the reason why reveals the insidious nature of intimate partner violence when the abuser has power and resources. Adam threatened to sue her for defamation and libel. As an attorney, he knew exactly how to weaponize the legal system against his victim. He knew how to make the process of seeking protection more terrifying than enduring the abuse. Legal experts would later question whether his threat itself should have been considered a violation worthy of protective action. But the damage was done. Caitlyn backed down, trapped by a system that should have protected her, but instead became another tool of her abuser. 2024 brought a horrifying escalation in the violence. On a night in January, around 8:30 p.m., Caitlyn called 911. Her voice was urgent, desperate, telling the dispatcher to hurry because Adam was drunk and had pushed her down. When police arrived at her New Buffalo home, Adam had already fled like the coward he was. But the officers could see the evidence of what had happened. Caitlyn had visible signs of an altercation on her body. One officer would later recall finding her bleeding all over her face. She reported that Adam had tried to stop her from calling for help, a common tactic abusers use to maintain control and avoid consequences. But Adam wasn't done. Before disappearing into the night, he stole valuable personal items from Caitlyn, totaling about $45,000, a Chanel purse, a Cartier watch, a diamond tennis bracelet, cash. These weren't impulsive grabs. This was calculated theft, meant to punish her for calling the police, meant to show her that he could take whatever he wanted from her, including her sense of security and her possessions. While police searched for him, Adam sent Caitlyn threatening text messages that revealed his mindset. He told her he was still around, watching, monitoring the situation. The message was clear. He could see her. He knew what she was doing, and there was nowhere she could go that he wouldn't find her. It was psychological warfare designed to keep her living in constant fear. Despite this documented incident, despite the physical evidence, despite Caitlyn's testimony and the stolen property, the system once again failed to protect her adequately. The criminal justice system moved at its usual glacial pace while Caitlyn continued living in terror, never knowing when Adam would show up again, what he would do next, whether the next attack would be the one that killed her. August 19, 2024. Just 2 months before Caitlyn's death, the escalation that had been building for years reached a new peak. Caitlyn called 911 again, and by terrible coincidence, one of the responding officers was the same one who had seen her bleeding in January. When the officer arrived, he found the door slightly open, and the sounds coming from inside were gut-wrenching. Caitlyn was screaming and crying for help while she was on the floor, Adam presumably standing over her, continuing his assault. Officers had to hold Adam at taser point to prevent further violence. When they tried to arrest him, he resisted like a man who believed he was above the law. He struggled violently, kicking or hitting one of the officers in the chest and injuring the officer's wrist. The body cam footage from this arrest would later become crucial evidence, showing Adam's true character, his complete lack of respect for authority, his belief that he could bully and intimidate his way out of any situation. The charges filed against him after the August incident painted a picture of a man completely out of control. Assault and battery, domestic violence, assault on a police officer, interference with telecommunications for preventing Caitlyn from calling for help, intimidation, larceny, resisting arrest. It was a laundry list of criminal behavior, each charge representing another moment of terror for Caitlyn, another instance where Adam chose violence over humanity. But still, somehow, Adam Beckerink walked free. He was arrested, processed, and released. The wheels of justice turned slowly while Caitlyn's danger increased exponentially. Everyone who understands domestic violence knows the statistics. The most dangerous time for a victim is when they try to leave. And Caitlyn was trying to leave. She had relocated away from Chicago. She was living near or with her parents. She had filed for protection. She had called the police. She was doing everything society tells victims to do to stay safe. And it wasn't enough, because the system designed to protect victims of domestic violence is fundamentally broken, full of gaps that abusers like Adam Beckerink know how to exploit. He had money. He had legal knowledge. He had the presumption of respectability that comes with being a partner at a prestigious law firm, and he used all of those advantages to continue his reign of terror over the woman he claimed to love. Adam's professional life was beginning to crumble. Duane Morris, the law firm where he worked as a partner, fired him after Caitlyn's parents alleged in court documents that he had physically abused their daughter. Even his colleagues, people invested in protecting the firm's reputation, could no longer ignore the mounting evidence that one of their partners was a violent abuser. But being fired didn't humble Adam. It didn't make him reflect on his behavior. It only made him angrier, more desperate, more dangerous. By October 2024, Caitlyn was living in a state of constant vigilance. She was estranged from Adam, but not legally divorced, trapped in that liminal space where she was trying to move on but still legally bound to the man who had terrorized her. She stayed connected to her family, drawing strength from their support, trying to rebuild a life that Adam had systematically destroyed. She was still working, still maintaining her professional identity, still fighting to be more than just a victim. But Adam wasn't ready to let her go. Abusers never are. Two men like Adam Beckerink, their partners aren't people with autonomy and rights. They're possessions to be controlled, objects that exist solely for their benefit. And when those possessions try to escape, when they dare to assert their own humanity, abusers respond with the ultimate expression of control. If I can't have you, nobody will. It's a thought pattern as old as patriarchy itself, and it ends in violence more often than society wants to admit. October 25, 2024, the date that Caitlyn Tracy's worst fears became reality. Security cameras at 1201 South Prairie Avenue, a high-rise condominium building in Chicago's South Loop, captured Caitlyn entering the building. This was Adam Beckerink's residence, a towering structure with sweeping views of the city, the kind of place that screamed success and sophistication. But on one of its upper floors, something horrific was about to happen. Adam would later tell police that he hadn't seen Caitlyn in weeks, maybe even a month. It was a lie, and the video evidence proved it immediately. Caitlyn was there, at his building, in his apartment, on October 24th. Exactly what happened in those hours between her arrival and her death may never be fully known, but the outcome was brutally clear. Caitlyn Tracy would never leave that building alive. The criminal complaint filed by Chicago police would later allege that Adam killed Caitlyn on October 25th. The method was as horrific as it was deliberate. According to investigators, Adam threw Caitlyn over the railing of the 24th floor of the east stairwell. Not the accidental stumble of someone losing their balance. Not the desperate act of someone who snapped in a moment of rage, but the calculated, forceful throwing of a human being from a height designed to ensure they would not survive. Imagine Caitlyn's final moments, the terror as Adam grabbed her, the realization that this was it, that all her fears were about to come true, the desperate fight for survival as he dragged or carried her toward that stairwell railing, the scream that may have echoed through the concrete shaft as she went over the edge, the seemingly endless fall through 24 stories of empty air, the impact that ended her life and pulverized her body. October 26, 2024. The day after he allegedly murdered his wife, Adam Beckerink called the police to report Caitlyn missing. The audacity of that action is staggering. He stood there, knowing exactly what he had done, knowing where her body lay broken and hidden in the building's stairwell, and performed concern for the benefit of authorities. He told them he hadn't seen her in weeks or even a month, crafting a timeline that would distance him from her death, that would make him seem uninvolved and confused rather than guilty and calculated. But Adam made mistakes. Even the smartest criminals make mistakes, and Adam's arrogance would be his downfall. Police began investigating immediately, and the inconsistencies in his story emerged quickly. The security footage showing Caitlyn at the building, the fact that her car and possessions would be found at locations that contradicted Adam's timeline. And then there were the phones. Adam's phone and Caitlyn's phone told their own story, a digital trail of deleted messages that Adam couldn't adequately explain. When police asked about the deleted messages between him and Caitlyn, Adam claimed that deleting their communications was just their method of correspondence, a bizarre explanation that made no sense to investigators who understood that most people preserve messages, especially with spouses, especially during contentious separations. Those deleted messages reeked of consciousness, of guilt, evidence being destroyed because it revealed a truth Adam desperately needed to hide. October 27, 2024, 2 days after Caitlyn's death, a tenant in the condominium building entered the east stairwell and discovered something that would haunt them forever. It wasn't initially recognized as a body. It was a body part, a severed human foot, lying near a railing in the lower level of the stairwell. Confused and horrified, the tenant called authorities. When police arrived and began investigating, they found bloodstains on the walls, on the floor, on the railings. The trail of evidence painted a picture of incomprehensible violence, of a body falling with such force and velocity that it left biological evidence scattered across multiple surfaces. Officers checked the rest of the stairwell, following the blood trail, dreading what they would find but needing to complete their search. At the bottom of the east stairwell, they found her, Caitlyn Tracy, 36 years old, lying face down, covered in blood, missing a foot. Her body had fallen approximately 24 stories, and the impact had been catastrophic. The medical examiner would later document skull fractures and rib fractures. Her remains were, in the words of her parents' affidavit, pulverized. The force required to sever a human foot through impact alone is difficult to comprehend. This wasn't a simple fall. This was destruction on a scale that spoke to the immense height and the brutal physics of a body in free fall. The investigation immediately focused on Adam Beckerink. He was the estranged husband. He had a documented history of violence against Caitlyn. He had lied about when he last saw her. He had deleted messages. He had reported her missing just hours before her body was found. Every arrow pointed directly at him, and investigators knew they needed to act quickly before he could flee or further obstruct the investigation. Adam was held for questioning for 48 hours by the Chicago Police Department Violent Crimes Unit. For 2 days, detectives worked to break through his lies, to get him to confess, to provide any shred of truth about what happened on that 24th floor. But Adam was a lawyer. He knew how to navigate interrogations. He knew when to talk and when to stay silent. He knew that without a confession, without physical evidence directly tying him to the act of throwing Caitlyn, the case against him would be circumstantial. After 48 hours, police had to release him. They didn't have enough yet to charge him with murder. The investigation needed more time, more evidence, more pieces of the puzzle that would allow prosecutors to walk into a courtroom and convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that Adam Beckerink had murdered his wife. But they did charge him with something, filing a false missing persons report. It was a small charge, almost insulting given the magnitude of what he had actually done, but it was something. It kept him in the system. It put him on notice that investigators weren't fooled by his performance. The investigation intensified. Detectives knew they were building what would become a circumstantial case, and circumstantial cases require meticulous attention to every detail. They started pulling together every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every digital footprint that would help prove what common sense already screamed. Adam Beckerink had killed his wife. The physics alone told a story. Forensic experts were brought in to analyze the trajectory of Caitlyn's fall. When a body falls straight down, whether from a jump or an accidental loss of balance, the trajectory follows certain predictable patterns based on gravity and the body's center of mass. But when a body is thrown, especially thrown with force by someone trying to ensure it clears the railing and falls all the way to the bottom, the trajectory changes. The distance from the railing where the body lands, the angle of impact, the distribution of injuries, all of these factors can help investigators determine whether this was an accident, a suicide, or a murder. The domestic violence history became crucial. Prosecutors knew they would face challenges introducing prior bad acts evidence at trial, but there were ways around those restrictions. The protective order Caitlyn had filed, even though she withdrew it, was a court document that could be introduced. The January and August 2024 incidents were criminal charges against Adam, matters of public record that established a pattern of escalating violence. Witnesses who had heard Caitlyn speak about the abuse, including her mother, could potentially testify about her state of mind and her fear. Digital evidence became a focal point. Investigators obtained records from both Caitlyn and Adam's phones, looking for location data, communication patterns, anything that would establish a timeline and prove Adam's proximity to Caitlyn at the time of her death. They likely examined data from smart devices. If Caitlyn wore an Apple Watch or similar fitness tracker, the biometric data stored on those devices could reveal critical information. heart rate data showing a spike, consistent with extreme fear or physical struggle, GPS data tracking her movements through the building, activity data showing when her body stopped moving. The deleted messages haunted the investigation. What had Adam and Caitlyn discussed in those final communications? Were there threats, pleas for help, evidence of Adam luring Caitlyn to the building under false pretenses? The fact that Adam had systematically deleted their correspondence suggested those messages contained something incriminating, something that would have immediately revealed his guilt. But proving murder when someone falls from a building is notoriously difficult. The medical examiner initially couldn't definitively rule the manner of death as homicide. Falls can be accidental, they can be suicides, without witnesses, without video of the actual act, without a confession. Determining intent requires piecing together circumstantial evidence until the picture becomes clear enough that no other explanation makes sense. Detectives worked for months, building their case one detail at a time. They interviewed neighbors, building staff, anyone who might have seen or heard something suspicious. They analyzed security camera footage frame by frame, tracking movements, establishing timelines. They consulted with experts in domestic violence, learning about the patterns and escalations that predict lethal outcomes. They studied similar cases, learning from prosecutors who had successfully convicted abusers of murder, even when the physical evidence was limited. Meanwhile, Adam Beckerink displayed behavior that further cemented investigators' belief in his guilt. Instead of grieving, instead of cooperating fully with the investigation, instead of showing any remorse or horror at what had happened to his wife, Adam fought Caitlyn's parents for custody of her remains. He wanted her cremated, and he fought for that right for more than 2 weeks, forcing Caitlyn's devastated parents to go to court just to reclaim their daughter's body so they could give her a proper funeral and burial. The cruelty of that action cannot be overstated. Adam allegedly murdered Caitlyn, threw her from a building, and then fought to control what happened to her remains. Some observers speculated he wanted her cremated to eliminate any possibility of future forensic examination. Others believed it was one final act of control, one last way to torture the family who had never accepted him and had tried to save their daughter from his violence. In June 2025, 8 months after Caitlyn's death, Adam revealed his true character in a way that shocked even seasoned investigators. He was scheduled for court-ordered drug testing at a Concentra urgent care clinic in Chicago's Westtown neighborhood. What happened next would result in contempt of court charges and provide prosecutors with additional evidence of Adam's character and judgment. Adam appeared at the clinic intoxicated after consuming alcohol, violating the conditions of his bond. Employees immediately recognized he was drunk, his speech slurred, his movements uncoordinated. But instead of cooperating with the court-ordered testing, Adam began showing intimidating and threatening behavior toward the clinic workers. He touched a worker's hand without permission and asked her on a date, inappropriate behavior that made staff uncomfortable. Then he went into the bathroom, and what happened next was so bizarre and disturbing that it seemed almost unbelievable. Adam pulled down his pants, exposing himself to the entire staff. Then he defecated all over the floor and himself, before returning to his car. It was behavior so erratic, so clearly indicative of someone in psychological distress or operating without normal inhibitions, that a Berrien County judge found him in contempt of court for violating conditions prohibiting assaultive, abusive, intimidating, threatening, violent, aggressive, or stalking behavior, and for consuming alcohol. This incident would become what prosecutors called a very, very big piece of evidence showing Adam's character. It demonstrated someone spiraling out of control, someone unable to manage basic social norms, someone whose facade of professional respectability had completely crumbled. Jurors would hear about this and see a man capable of anything, a man whose judgment was so impaired or whose arrogance was so complete that he believed he could behave this way without consequences. The investigation continued through the summer and fall of 2025. Prosecutors worked closely with detectives, determining what evidence could be used at trial, what witnesses would be most effective, how to structure a narrative that would convince a jury. They knew they had one shot at this. If they charged Adam with murder and lost at trial, double jeopardy would prevent them from ever charging him again. The case had to be ironclad before they proceeded. October 20th, 2025, almost exactly 1 year after Caitlyn Tracy's death, Adam Beckerink stood in a Berrien County courtroom and pleaded no contest to the Michigan domestic violence charges and contempt of court charges stemming from the January and August 2024 incidents and the bizarre clinic incident. By taking a no contest plea, Adam avoided going to trial, a strategic decision that legal analysts believed was designed to prevent extensive domestic violence evidence from being exposed in a public forum before the pending murder charge. The sentencing hearing became an opportunity for Caitlyn's family to finally speak publicly about the horror Adam had inflicted on their daughter. Dr. Monica Tracy, Caitlyn's mother, delivered a victim impact statement that laid bare the devastating toll of Adam's violence. She called him a controlling coward, a brute who repeatedly beat, bruised, and battered her daughter, a man who prevented Caitlyn from calling for help during her darkest moments. Dr. Tracy's words captured the ongoing nightmare the family endured. She said it wasn't just Caitlyn's death that haunted them. It was the slow-moving destruction of her life, watching helplessly as Adam systematically broke down the strong, confident woman they loved. She spoke about how, instead of meeting her daughter for dinner, she and her husband now visited Caitlyn's grave. She made it clear that no justice could heal their pain, that the loss of a child is a wound that never fully closes. Adam was sentenced to 93 days in jail and 2 years of probation for the domestic violence and contempt charges. It was a relatively light sentence, considering the severity of his actions, but it kept him incarcerated and under supervision, limiting his ability to flee or destroy evidence as the murder investigation continued. 1 week later, the hammer fell. On October 27, 2025, exactly 1 year to the day after Caitlyn's body was discovered at the bottom of that stairwell, news outlets reported that Adam Beckerink had been formally charged with first-degree murder in connection with her death. A Cook County judge had issued a first-degree murder arrest warrant, and Adam was being held on a fugitive warrant at the Berrien County Jail in Michigan. The murder charge represented a major step toward justice, according to Caitlyn's parents, who released a statement praising the efforts of Chicago police and Cook County State's Attorney Eileen O'Neill Burke. But the statement also revealed the family's enduring pain and their desperate need for closure. They expressed hope that the truth about the last months of Caitlyn's life and the events leading to her tragic death would be revealed so their wonderful daughter could finally be laid to rest. The criminal complaint laid out the prosecution's theory in stark, horrifying detail. Adam Beckerink allegedly killed Caitlyn Tracy on October 25, 2024 by throwing her over the railing of the 24th floor of the east stairwell at 1201 South Prairie Avenue. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a suicide. It was murder, plain and simple, committed by a man who had threatened, beaten, and controlled his wife for years and finally decided that if he couldn't have her, nobody would. The bond was set at $2 million. A figure that reflected both the severity of the charge and the flight risk prosecutors believed Adam represented. He was a man with resources, with legal knowledge, with every incentive to flee rather than face a trial that could result in life imprisonment. As of the reporting dates, Adam had not waived extradition, delaying his transfer from Michigan to Illinois to face the murder charge. It was one final stalling tactic, one last attempt to delay the inevitable reckoning. The evidence prosecutors planned to present at trial represented months of painstaking investigation. The security camera footage showing Caitlyn entering the building on October 24th, directly contradicting Adam's claims that he hadn't seen her in weeks. The deleted text messages that Adam couldn't explain, digital evidence of consciousness of guilt. The domestic violence history establishing a pattern of escalating violence and control. The protective order Caitlyn had filed detailing Adam's abuse. The 2 arrests in 2024, with police body cam footage showing Adam's violence and his resistance when confronted with consequences. The physics and trajectory analysis would be crucial. Expert witnesses would testify about how Caitlyn's fall didn't match the pattern of an accident or suicide. The distance her body landed from the building, the force required to achieve that trajectory, the angle of impact. All of these technical details would paint a picture of someone being thrown rather than falling. Jurors would hear complex scientific testimony, but the underlying conclusion would be simple. Caitlyn Tracy didn't jump. She didn't fall. She was pushed. The biometric data from any smart devices Caitlyn was wearing could provide a haunting timeline of her final moments. If her Apple Watch or fitness tracker recorded her heart rate during the attack, Investigators could potentially show the spike that occurred during a violent struggle, the terror response of a body in extreme danger. The GPS data could track her movements through the building, establishing she was on the 24th floor at the relevant time. The accelerometer data could show the moment of freefall, technology bearing witness to a murder when no human observers were present. But perhaps the most powerful evidence would be Adam's own behavior. His lies to police about when he last saw Caitlyn, his false missing person report, his fight to control her remains and have her cremated, his complete lack of cooperation with investigators, his June incident at the clinic that revealed a man spiraling out of control, and most damningly, his history of violence toward Caitlyn documented in court records, police reports, and the testimony of witnesses who had heard him threaten to kill her. The domestic violence context would help jurors understand the motive and the pattern. Experts could testify about how the most dangerous time for a victim is when they try to leave, how abusers escalate when they lose control, how men like Adam Beckerink view their partners as property rather than people. Caitlyn had filed for a protective order. She had relocated away from Chicago. She had called police twice in 2024. She was estranged from Adam and trying to move on with her life. All of these facts supported the prosecution's theory that Adam lured her to his building and killed her because he couldn't accept that she was leaving him. The legal battles extended beyond the criminal case. Following the murder charge, Caitlyn's parents filed motions in Berrien County Probate Court, seeking to protect their daughter's memory and assets. They wanted Adam excluded from any inheritance rights to Caitlyn's estate, citing Michigan law concerning forfeiture if a person feloniously and intentionally kills the decedent. It was a provision known colloquially as the Slayer Law, designed to prevent murderers from profiting from their crimes. The family also sought to prohibit disclosure of Caitlyn's burial location to Adam, expressing very real fear that he might try to, in their words, scoop her up. Even in death, even from behind bars, Adam represented a threat to Caitlyn's peace and her family's ability to mourn. The fact that they had to go to court to protect her gravesite from the man who killed her was a final indignity, a last act of violence that extended beyond death. Questions swirled about Adam's Chicago condo, the building where Caitlyn died. The property was reportedly for sale for over $1 million, raising concerns about where those funds would go. If Adam was convicted, the Slayer Law would presumably prevent him from accessing those assets. But if he was acquitted, despite all the evidence, he could potentially profit from the sale of the building where he murdered his wife. The thought sickened everyone following the case. Adam Beckerink currently sits in Berrien County Jail, serving his 93-day sentence for the domestic violence convictions while awaiting extradition to Illinois. His former attorneys had previously claimed there was no corroboration of Caitlyn's abuse claims, a statement rendered absurd by the mountain of evidence, including police reports, body cam footage, court filings, and witness testimony. At his sentencing for the domestic violence charges, Adam had the audacity to say he missed his wife and was unable to grieve, claiming he loved her more than anything. Those words ring hollow to anyone who knows the facts of this case. Love doesn't strangle. Love doesn't slam heads against cabinets. Love doesn't put partners in headlocks or prevent them from calling for help. Love doesn't assault police officers who respond to domestic violence calls. Love doesn't throw people from 24-story buildings. What Adam felt toward Caitlyn wasn't love. It was possession, control, and ultimately murderous rage when that control was threatened. The trial has not yet occurred as of the latest reporting. Adam maintains his innocence regarding the murder charge, and he has a constitutional right to his day in court, to present a defense, to force the prosecution to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. But the evidence against him is overwhelming. The circumstantial pieces have been assembled into a picture that allows for only one reasonable conclusion. Adam Beckerink murdered his wife. When the trial finally happens, likely in 2026, a jury will hear all of the evidence. They will see the body cam footage of Adam resisting arrest as Caitlyn screamed for help. They will hear recordings of her 911 calls, her voice desperate and afraid. They will learn about the protective order she filed and the threats Adam made. They will see the security footage showing she was at his building when he claimed he hadn't seen her. They will hear expert testimony about physics and trajectory and how Caitlyn's fall was inconsistent with anything except being thrown. And they will be asked to decide, did Adam Beckerink murder Caitlyn Tracy? The answer seems obvious to everyone who has followed this case, but the American justice system requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and it will be up to Cook County prosecutors to present that proof in a way that leaves no room for uncertainty. For Caitlyn's family, no verdict would bring their daughter back. Dr. Tracy said it best: "There is no justice that can heal their pain, but perhaps there can be accountability. Perhaps there can be a moment where the system that failed Caitlyn so many times finally works the way it's supposed to, where an abuser is held responsible for his violence, where a murdered woman's family gets to hear the words guilty beyond a reasonable doubt." Caitlyn Tracy was a tech executive, a daughter, a woman with unlimited potential and a bright future. She deserved to grow old, to advance her career, to find real love with someone who cherished rather than controlled her. Instead, she is buried in a grave her family has to legally protect from the man who put her there. She is a statistic in America's ongoing domestic violence crisis. One more woman killed by her intimate partner in a country where such murders happen with horrifying regularity. The case remains open as it moves through the legal system. But one thing is already certain: Caitlyn Tracy called for help, and help didn't come in time. The system had multiple chances to save her. 2 911 calls, 2 arrests, a protective order filing, every possible warning sign that a woman was in lethal danger, and still, she ended up at the bottom of a stairwell with a severed foot and a pulverized body. How many more women have to die before we start believing victims? How many more calls for help have to go unanswered before we recognize that domestic violence is a life-threatening emergency, not a private family matter? How many more Caitlyn Tracys have to be murdered before we build a system that actually protects the people crying out for protection? These are questions without easy answers, but they are questions we must continue asking, because somewhere right now, another woman is living in fear of her partner. Another woman is weighing whether to call police, whether to file for protection, whether leaving is worth the risk. Another woman is one argument away from becoming the next victim, the next headline, the next case study in how society fails to protect the vulnerable. Caitlyn Tracy deserved better. She deserved to live, and the very least we can do is ensure that her death means something, that the system learns from its failures, that future victims get the protection and support she was denied. Justice delayed is justice denied, but for Caitlyn, perhaps justice is finally coming. 1 year late, one life too late, but coming nonetheless.